Welcome back to another edition of the Edge podcast. Publisher Brenden Slaughter here for BeaversEdge.com, joined by Beavers Edge writer Ryan Harlan and Beavers Edge writer and KEGO radio host T.J. Mathewson. We're coming to you guys during Oregon State's bye week as the Beavers currently sit 4-4, second bye week of the season with 8 games left to play. They got San Jose State and Washington State at home, Air Force and Boise State on the road to wrap up the 2024 regular season slate. We're going to be getting into the nuts and bolts of the schedule, talking about the first 8 games, our big takeaways from the first 8, and then most importantly, talking about the big question on everyone's minds as we approach these Final Four. What are the odds the Beavers could win a couple and still make a bowl game and salvage this season? So appreciate everyone jumping on this edition of the Edge podcast. Fellas, what's going on? Hope you're doing well. Happy Halloween as we're recording this on a Halloween night. TJ's rocking the Kraken jersey. I wasn't smart enough to think to wear something. I probably should have. Ryan, you got a t-shirt on? Looks like a little something.
I'm dressed as my favorite guitarist of all time, Tom DeLonge, Blink
Oh,
182.
okay, so there you go. So just Brenden
Yeah.
is not in on the game. So again, as TJ and I mentioned, Ryan still being a student at Oregon State, I would expect nothing less on Halloween for sure. But no, it's good to see you guys. How you guys doing and enjoying the bye week? It's kind of nice to take a breath, collectively reset because I'll tell you this much, fellas. I saw there were a lot of tweets that summed up the performance in Berkeley, but I got to give credit. It might have been the Barstool Beavs account was just like going for a long drive after this one. And I think that's very apropos. Like TJ, I can tell you one thing from Ryan and I's perspective. It was a tough lesson in pain to write those takeaways and write those numbers and kind of dive into some real deep negatives. And thank goodness, I mean, I'll tell you guys this. Thank goodness Oregon State broke the streak of being shut out. Because if they had gotten shut out, I had the statistic ready, unfortunately. Can't remember, it was sometime in the mid 80s. They got beat by USC 69-0 on the road. And that was the mark they would have been going up against if they had gotten beaten on the road. Everyone was talking about 2015 when they got beat 41-0. Cal was up more than that at 1-0 before they got that, touchdown at the end. So not good. TJ and I talked about that before we recorded the podcast. Not good to be associated with any Oregon State football in the 80s. So that's a really good stat that you don't want to be associated with. But fellas, before we get into kind of the first 8 games, just real briefly, that's the worst Oregon State football game I have watched I thought like Nevada earlier this year was bad. The second half against Oregon was bad. That was the worst I've seen Oregon State play. Like it turned out to be the worst loss since they lost to Utah 52-7 in 2019. That game is definitely reminiscent. But I would say it kind of felt like 2015 when UCLA beat them 41-0 at home. Like it was the worst loss I've seen for this program in some time. TJ, I'll start with you. The vibe from the post-game show, I imagine, was very similar to the vibe we were getting on the damn board where Ryan and I were like, like yeah.
There's not, I don't like. There's not much else to see. You got beat up and down the field. It was evident early in the game. It was evident, like just watching the two teams on the field, speed-wise, getting to the edge, controlling the line of scrimmage, and watching Fernando Mendoza. It took about 3 drives, and watching him like a year removed from the first time the Beavers played him his first career start, and he played decently well against DJ. DJ's one real excellent game passing the football down in Berkeley a season ago. And it looked like that Fernando made it a point on Saturday for that to be him. He does things that no quarterback on the Beaver roster can do. Moving with his feet, throwing off platform,
Yep.
the arm strength. Like you can't even like raise your eyebrows at that. Like that's objectively true, watching him. So disappointing. I'm thinking definitely the worst loss I've seen since I've been here since August of 21. Clearly,
We're just going back.
Even with being there being like some fine teams since I've been here. Like that was bad. And at least that Utah loss you mentioned in 2019, that was a great Utah team. That was a phenomenal Utah team. This is a 500 Cal team that ran you off the field. There is nothing positive to take away from that game. There's not one area of the field I think you can come away and say, well, I thought we did that pretty well. No, that wasn't it.
It was, and it's funny you mentioned that because I glossed over it. As bad as it was, because fellas, being there in person at the 2023 Civil War, when everybody knew in the press box that Jonathan Smith was on the jet, like that was bad. But even that in that game, which Oregon didn't kind of roll. They rolled. That didn't feel as bad as that Cal game. I'll say this because Ryan and I did have to dive into the nitty gritty. Ryan, the run defense showed up.
Yeah, I mean,
like
if you
want to take away TJ, they stopped Jay Todd.
Moral victory.
The tackling
that was like an average game for Cal. Like Cal couldn't run the football all season.
The tackling was off the charts good. I don't know if anyone noticed that too.
Shockingly,
it was like it actually broke. It broke the Oregon State PFF scale in 10 years of data for how good Oregon State's tackling was. Outside of all that, they didn't really belong on the football field.
I know that tackling grade doesn't take into account where they tackled the person. Whether it be like 30 yards downfield or
very accurate. That's fair, but hey, this is a team who
didn't face any resistance on defense. It was Fernando Mendoza who had probably his best game of the season.
Again,
and the pass rush. Yeah, a pass rush that could not touch him.
Oh, no, for sure. Like the pass rush, obviously very bad. But again, as we talked about, that was one of the things I was watching really closely all year. Guys, I went back and looked again. There was not one team in America, I'm talking UConn, I'm talking UMass, who tackled worse than the Beavers in 2023. So to see them now in the mid-60s, mid-70s, hey, at least that's something. But no, Ryan, let's kick it over to you real quick. Just your quick thoughts on that game, and then we'll kind of dive into the good, the bad, and the ugly from the first 8 weeks of the season.
Wasn't great. I mean, immediately from the jump.
Oh God, it was
that bad. That lateral to Fernando
should have known it wasn't your day. It wasn't your day when that happened.
I was like, so this is how this game's gonna go. Yeah. And I'm like, sure enough, it just a thing that could have gone wrong went wrong. When it rains, it pours. Just not great.
Yeah.
No way to sugarcoat it. That was arguably, I think, one of the worst performances I've seen this team play in my time here. And 2019, obviously, against Utah, that was one game where I tried staying to the end of that game, but I just simply couldn't.
That was tough.
Couldn't anymore. And then by the time I got back to my dorm, my freshman year, that's when I saw Tristan Gebbia score the first touchdown of the game for Oregon State. So,
that was bad. That was a really rough. I mean, that was rough. And I just remember that game being like, ooh. And that year turned out to be a frustrating 5-7 year in Jonathan's second season. But it's not good company. Like earlier, I talked about how it was almost the worst company Oregon State football has ever had historically. They thankfully didn't do that, but just really bad company. Not much more to speak about with the game itself. But in general, guys, before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts, because again, there is still a chance to make a bowl game. There's still a chance to have something positive to hang your hat on. And I go back to how key was it to get that win against Colorado State now as we sit here? Because Oregon State kind of has 2 winnable games left on their schedule. Not going to say Washington State's totally unwinnable, but the Cougars have looked so much better than them this year at various junctures, more complete team, better quarterback play, all that. So all that to say, they'll be hanging their hat on the next 2 games. But as a whole, now that we've had 8 weeks, I mean, the first 4 weeks, your only loss was to Oregon. You felt ridiculously positive. Then you have this second stretch where you only wins Colorado State, and you've got losses to Nevada, losses to UNLV, and losses to Cal. Now, before the season, if you had said losses to UNLV and Cal, I don't think you would have been upset, maybe disappointed. I don't think upset. I think everyone knew Cal would be a tougher game on the road. UNLV would be pretty good again. But again, I go back to Reno. That's the game that under no circumstances could you have lost this year. And imagine how we'd be sitting right now if Oregon State was 5-3 instead of 4-4. You'd be thinking about yourself much more positively. And it goes back to what TJ has said time and time again. Like this year, Oregon State had to win the games they were supposed to win because there wasn't going to be very good odds you were going to win the games you weren't supposed to win because of the lack of depth, injuries, all these things. Like your margin for error is so much slimmer. And for the most part, again, UNLV and Cal went chalk, but now they put a lot of pressure. It's crazy how multiple weeks later that game against Nevada is still haunting their bowl chances, but it is as we currently sit here. So, overall impressions I have early on is just the two halves of the whole. After the first 4 weeks, you felt very positive. Second 4 weeks, you feel much more negative. I think injuries are my number one and biggest injuries and inconsistent quarterback play. I think the defense was good early. Again, I don't know if it's pure schematic stuff. I think it really just, I hate to use excuses, but injuries are such a big part of what's happened to this team, and then just lack of offensive consistency. And, Jam Griffin's a part of that too. So those would be my biggest kind of takeaways off the shoot. TJ, let's go ahead and move over to you. What stands out to you, and do you kind of see it as a Jekyll and Hyde first four and last four too?
I don't know if it's quite as much. I think it mostly has to do with matchups. Like, we know Purdue now is bad. We know San Diego State now is not good.
They did play Washington State tough, though. They did.
Tough?
I mean,
they played the Beavers tough, too.
Well, I mean,
that game was going to be 7-7 in the second half, if not for a scoop fumble. So, and then you open with an FCS team. So it's like it could have just been like the structuring of the matchups were in your favor, on top of being a little bit healthier. Yeah, the team's a little bit better when you're healthier. That's pretty clear. The other thing that was pretty clear, because at least the defense can use, hey, we don't have as much depth, transfers, graduations. Sure. There's a really old unit on defense last year on top of a new staff. It's just like the worst possible combination. Okay. Schematics probably need another year to really defer whether or not Keith Hayward's version of Trent Bray's defense is actually good or bad.
Sure.
So there's that part. Because right now it's not good, but they have the injuries. What is abundantly clear is that through 8 weeks, you can very easily tell the skill positions are just not helping your team out at all.
Yeah.
You lost your best skill position player to injury. They haven't confirmed Jam Griffin's out for the year, but they've been just so vague that I think if there was any chance he was coming back, there would be something. Somebody would say something. Someone would report something, but no one's reported anything. So I'm going to take that as not expecting him back this year. Okay. So that's your best skill position player. You look outside, none of your receivers are threats. They haven't presented a threat really in the passing game. Trent Walker's your most targeted receiver. He's also your least explosive receiver. Every time he catches the ball, he doesn't have enough speed to get yards after catch. So he's always tackled. And what also doesn't help with that is his ability to consistently get open, which has been another issue for this wide receiver room. And part of the struggles for the quarterback position this year has just been like, are guys open or not?
Right.
And unfortunately not. It also, as you were noting before, as the PFF stats note, the Beavers can't really throw deep because of that position group. They can't take the top off the defense. They have to use more plays in a drive to score touchdowns. And if that's the case, you're more likely to screw up, or you're more likely to fail on third down and have to kick.
Right.
So that also leads into offensive inefficiency. And then the last note on this is that Anthony Hankerson's a pretty complete back, but he's not one that's going to break off long runs like Jam Griffin. Jam Griffin's a little bit more explosive. When Hank's running, he's going to get you between 3 and 10 to 15 yards, but he's not going any farther than that. Just the offense lacks the offense lacks the threat to score from anywhere on the field, and that really hurts a team when you're trying to keep up with an injured defense.
Yeah, no, I think everything you hit is absolutely spot on, and particularly the skill positions. I mean, you look at it like you look at like again, I think you got to give Trent Walker his flowers, right? I mean, the dude came out of nowhere, a former walk-on who is now leading this team in receiving yards, and like I said, it is not even close. Like TJ mentioned, some physical limitations, sure, but you always need a glue guy who can go get you that first down on third downs and catch the ball, lean right into the sticks, and he's great at that. But the fact that we talked about it. Jeremiah Noga's really struggled this year as far as like just overall efficiency goes. I know he's had some moments. Taz Reddick's flashing but young. Darius Clemens, maybe it was the late getting into the rotation, since he didn't really enter until after, midway into the season. But he has not quite been that dude that we thought he maybe would be, the guy who's kind of just the kind of physical backbreaker. Because, right, you look at him and he kind of has something the rest of the room doesn't, but they haven't really kind of been able to get that in sync. So, like you said, all that's true. Even bringing in Jermaine Terry as a receiver in the last couple weeks hasn't really done enough to like break the top off the defense. It's been better, don't get
Right.
me wrong. But to your point, TJ,
There's a big drop off from Jack Velling. Jack Velling
oh,
could score from anywhere on the field. The dude
well,
would score
yes.
long touchdowns.
And to your point, you said nowhere to score. I think it's telling, and we'll do this to lead into Ryan's point, because I know he died to talk about the quarterbacks. I think the biggest threat to score is Giovanni McCoy in an option keeper when the defense is designed. We saw that 77-yard run. That's Oregon State's most explosive, or 71-yard run, excuse me. That's Oregon State's most explosive play of the year, minus the big David Wells catch in the opener. Like, what, you're like, a deep ball, a moonshot? That's a play, right? But like, yeah, I think that McCoy run right now, just off the top of my head, I would need to go back and look at all the plays. That's like the most explosive offensive play of the year. So, and that goes back to TJ's point. If McCoy's not going to run, what's he doing out there? So, Ryan, let's go over to you. Obviously, you're going to be working on a column for Beaver's Edge, kind of really taking a deep dive into the quarterback play that y'all can check out on Friday, November 1st, as that'll be up there. But just ultimately, what's your kind of thoughts on the quarterback situation? They went with three guys against Cal. It's unclear who they're kind of committing to going forward, but like, just what's your 2 cents on this, and how do you ultimately see this shaking out? Kind of the final 4 weeks of the season.
Yeah, the thing about quarterback play that's really gotten me, and partly where I kind of like feel with like the offensive play calling in particular, is McCoy is a better threat at running the ball, like you said, with that 71-yard touchdown against UNLV versus like throwing through the air. He's only thrown over 200 yards in 2 games this entire season. And I think part of that's just due now to the fact that like teams have tape on this Oregon State offense. There's a lot more out there. They can scheme a lot easier, and knowing kind of what the personnel is and what their talents are, what their limitations are, I think is also very telling into why there's some of these inconsistencies. Like I said in Colorado State to you, Brendan, that the Rams could have easily just stacked the box and played really soft and said, "Hey, McCoy,
Right.
beat us with your arm."
Yeah.
And and I think the times he's been able to really show that are when they're playing soft, or right at the very end of games where they're just trying to use their talent and depth
Right.
to out physical the other opponent and the other team. But if McCoy's not going to run and you're going to keep him in the pocket, you're going to make him into something that he's not, which I think maybe, he's probably maybe dealing with something that we don't know, as to why they went away from the option game. But like, if he's not going to be a threat to run and use his legs, then why not just go to Bengal Branson, who can do that stuff a little bit better? It's not necessarily, I would say, like, a like significant jump in what you're going to do offensively. But like, at least we saw against Cal that Ben was able to connect on a few plays and get the ball going down the field in the passing game, some semblance of a passing attack. it just you didn't see that when Giovanni was in against Cal, and
Right.
those 3 yards I definitely think is, very much a byproduct of that. But like I feel like whoever they go with, whether that be Giovanni, whether that be Ben, whether that be Jabari, um, I feel like if Giovanni is who they want running this offense, I wouldn't be surprised if he has a very short leash. Like if he continues to
Yeah.
struggle against San Jose State coming out of the bye week, I wouldn't be surprised if he has a short leash and basically is like, hey, we're gonna go to Ben or we're gonna go to Jabari, throw him in there because I think your best kind of option offensively, at least to generate something different, was that kind of 2 quarterback system that you also went away from early on in the season where it didn't work
Yep.
against Oregon.
And
It's
abandoned it ever
really
since. Just
yeah, and
abandoned it.
abandoned
Yep.
since. It's just I think you see I think with Giovanni's talent and what you brought him in, the Jerry Rice Award winner in 2022, but like I just I think you see what his ceiling is with this offense, especially if he doesn't run either, because that gives the defense something else to think about. But I also think you see what the ceiling is, and I think what we see now is probably what this offense looked like from the very beginning. Very beginning.
Right.
Kind of that, that kind of early 3-1 start is kind of, I would say, kind of fool's gold a little bit because really that Colorado State game I think was a big one in
Yeah.
particular of getting to that bowl eligibility,
Right.
because they should have and I'll say it again and I'll keep saying it, they should have lost that game.
If that
Colorado
game's not at
State,
home, they probably
yeah,
do. Do you both agree? I mean, if that game's on the road,
yeah,
they lose.
Probably.
Yeah. I
yeah,
mean,
Probably.
knowing,
yeah,
yeah.
but yeah, back to the quarterback. It's just that's the thing. It's like I think it's really the personnel you have in there, what you have talent wise at the quarterback position, and what you're just able to scheme up against talented, better
Yeah.
talented defenses. Um, it's just, it's kind of just you're dealt the hand that you're dealt with, and I
Right.
really would like to see some of those guys with speed a little more involved. And I think that could
Yeah.
help some of the stagnation that we see from the quarterback spot, and even with the skill position players, get, Zach Card more involved, get Taz Reddick's more involved, Jordan Anderson,
Yeah.
David
There's a name
Wells,
we haven't
at
seen.
least
Yeah.
something to stretch the field because Trent Walker and Darius Clemens don't have that speed to really stretch the field. It's not their
And I
skill
don't,
set.
and I don't really think Noga does particularly either. I mean, I
Yeah.
think, yeah, I think they're really like you talk about the guys they grab. Like Anthony Gould is on the Indianapolis Colts active roster because of how fast he is. Period. Like that is flat true. Silas Bolden playing for a college football national championship contender because of how fast he is. Period. Right? So, you talk about the guys last year and they just haven't been able to replicate that. So I definitely agree, but we'll obviously get into kind of the brass tacks of San Jose State next week when we're into the preview of itself. But, as promised, we're going to take a look at the bowl projections, and Ryan talked about it there. So it's a good segue because, again, your schedule this year segmented into 3 chunks. You had 4 games, bye, 4 games, bye, 4 games, end of the season. So now, again, Oregon State sits 4-4. They got 4 games left. They got San Jose State at home, Air Force on the road, Washington State at home, and Boise State on the road. Per FPI, which we wrote about earlier this week at Beaver's Edge, they give them a 66.5% chance to reach the 6-win plateau. So, as we were talking about, more than likely that means that Oregon State is, that is going to the next 2 games, which against San Jose State, they're 64% chance to win that game and a 76% chance to win Air Force. Just real quickly on the San Jose State, I mean, tough game. They played the Cougars tough. I know they got beat by Fresno State kind of bad before they went into their bye week, but that's still gonna be a tough game. Air Force, despite how bad Air Force is, and Air Force is one of the worst G5 teams this season, still on the road. We know what Oregon State does on the road, and that's a team that runs the ball extremely well in one of the academies. So neither one of those games are gimmies. But as we currently stand, guys, consider, and then, we throw in there the computers give them a 35% chance to beat the Cougs. I think that's a touch high, but respectable. Like, it's still, you walk into that game, okay, maybe you're 14-point dogs, but you maybe have a chance in that game because, respectfully, I don't think they'll have a chance against Boise State. I think that's going to be a very ugly Black Friday game. Maybe, again, a lot of ball yet to be played, all that, so on and so forth. But with that, guys, how confident are you in this team to be able to essentially stop the bleeding the next 2 weeks? Because one of the questions I think is key is, they've lost 3 in a row. I'm going to say one of them was very emotional in Nevada. UNLV, a little bit emotional too with the way they lost it at the end. And then, like I said, you saw the dam break, Beaver term, literally against Cal. And I think this is going to be a judge of Trent Bray as a head coach. Can you stop the bleeding, or will you see this team start to quit on the season? I've seen no indications that they will, but this last week was about as bad as it gets. So, again, can you circle the wagons, realize that a bowl game is the best thing to play for this season, and can you beat a San Jose State team who's probably on your level, maybe a little bit better win-loss wise, but on your level talent-wise at home, and an Air Force team that is really young and really inexperienced on their home turf? I pitch it to TJ first.
It's probably going to come down to the fourth quarter like it was against Colorado State at home, against San Jose State. I think that dictates it. They're going to beat Air Force. Air Force can't score. Like, their only win this year is against Merrimack at home.
I'm like,
right. Exactly.
Yeah,
it's in New York.
Fair enough.
So,
okay, so see there, I didn't know.
So that's it. Otherwise, they've played some closer games at home. Like, they lost to Colorado State by 1 score. They lost to San Jose State at home by 10 points.
So it still could be a game. It could
be a game. The Beavers probably, though, should still win against, if they lose to Air Force, they're not making a bowl game.
Yeah, we know that.
That I can say for certain.
Yeah.
San Jose State, it's going to probably be a 4 to 6 point spread at home. So it's a coin flip. I'm going to give them about 40%. I don't think they're beating the Cougs. I don't think they're beating Boise State.
Yeah.
So
you say 40% overall to make a bowl game?
Yeah, I'd say 40% overall, because at the end of the day, it mostly is dictated on how healthy they are coming out of the bye. I would imagine they're healthier. Are they healthy enough?
Right.
Is the question.
Ryan, what do you think?
Unfortunately, last point. Even with their talent advantage, they've shown the last few weeks, like, equal talent level or not, they played some bad football, flat out.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how talented you are. If you play bad football, you're going to lose.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting. Like I said, I would, if Oregon State can't beat San Jose State at home on family weekend, dad's weekend, whatever you want to call it, after a bye week, where it's kind of like Cal, right? Where you're like, we knew this was a bad matchup for Oregon State because Cal was foaming at the mouth, right? They lost 4 games in a row to teams that were much better than Oregon State. And I'm like, if Oregon State doesn't play very well, you're going to get a very angry Cal team. And TJ said, Fernando Mendoza maybe took that personally a little bit. So, going back to this is a game I'd like to see Oregon State take personally. And if you can beat San Jose State, I'm with TJ. I think your odds of beating Air Force are solid. I think the computer model is about what I would say. I give them about a 60-40 chance of going to a bowl game, maybe better than that. Like, I think one of those games being at home, you have to circle the way. I mean, you even played UNLV better at home. Simply put, we've seen this. The Beavers will always play teams better at home, period. Like, we have seen that time and time again. So San Jose State, that gives me some optimism there, considering they're the better team. The Air Force game, service academies can run the ball, fellas. And Oregon State's been up and down with that this year, so we'll see. But I give them about a 60-40 chance. Ryan, what do you say? And ultimately, what would you think it would mean in this year for them, even if they lose, but just for them to have something positive to hang their hat on moving into next season?
Oh, I think it's going to be huge. San Jose State, that game, I think, is going to be the decider of how the rest of the back half of the schedule goes. And now that could be dependent on a few things, whether that be, I think, who you get back from injuries, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. I know Jaden Robinson is targeting for a return to get back to the lineup for that game. If you can at least get some more guys back and kind of hide your deficiencies on offense a little bit against San Jose State, play a close game, because UNLV was that way, and that was something where that game I thought was going to be a little bit different kind of early on, and it was quite the opposite. So if you can at least do that, I think you set yourself up for a win at Air Force. That's not going to be really a give me either, because of the way that how so like you said, how Air Force can run the ball, how service academies run the ball, plus the weather in Colorado too at that point in time.
It'd be so cold. Maybe snow. Snow. Who knows?
Yeah, especially if you're going over in that area around like Fort Collins ish, kind of in that general vicinity of that part of the state. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there's snow. So that's not necessarily a gimme game either, but you at least better your chances. I still think they do win that game, just because I think they match up a lot better. But yeah, I don't see them winning against Wazoo. You never say never, of course, any given Saturday, but just
especially at home.
Especially with the way that they've played, I just don't see it. Realistically, I just don't see it. John Mateer has been a better quarterback than Giovanni McCoy this entire season, and I can say that pretty confidently in that realm. And then Ashton Genty is probably going to dice up that run defense on the road if they don't carry over that strong performance like we saw against Cal and UNLV in stopping the run. But if you don't win against San Jose State, it's going to be a long 3-game stretch to close out the season, because I think that's going to be huge. If you can at least get to that 5th win and then eventually get to 6, if you win San Jose State, but if you win number 6 at Air Force, and keep it competitive, and maybe the last 2 games, I call, even though that's kind of a moral victory there, I would say that's salvageable. That's something you could hang your hat on, and those extra bowl practices that you'll get, I think, will be huge to set up what you're going to do next year in that schedule.
So let me ask you both this, just in a one-word yes or no. Let's say, for the sake of this argument, they go to a bowl game. Let's say they win it. They finish season 7-6. If I had told us and Beaver fans, after Jonathan Smith left and took away the players that he took, the rest of the players hit the portal, we saw them have to sign a completely new recruiting class on the fly and everything. If you had told Beaver fans last year, at the end of all that mess, Trent Bray will take you to a bowl game, you'll go 7-6. Do Beaver fans take that?
Well, yeah. Do they have any choice?
Well, just like are they like, oh yes, solid, or are you? I'm just curious, because when you take a step back and you realize what they had lost, a part of me is like, man, if he does make a bowl game, all considering, like, it's not bad, right? Like, and I guess that's not
bad considering he's a first-year head coach, but he's under different circumstances than any first-year head coach ever, essentially.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, yeah, that's still, a good thing. It still shows you're relevant in the college football landscape. But I think at the start of this season, the general consensus I got from Oregon State fans was like, oh, you need to get 8-9 wins in order to be relevant.
That's true.
And that's something where it's like, well, yeah, but you're still, going to a bowl game at the end of the day, regardless of what that record is, and injuries and stuff, and things happen over the course of the season. The unpredictability in a football season is always going to be something that's going to change that. But for him, at least, I would call that a positive. I would probably say that as a positive, but also, like TJ said, Bray's under different circumstances than what Jonathan was under his first year, and
that's very true.
That's something where you're kind of in a win now type of mode, and so that's kind of just something where it's like that kind of factors into it a little bit. So sort of yes, but
I get it. For sure.
Yeah.
for sure.
Can't really give like a great answer.
Yeah, no,
on
it's
that,
hard. It's a tough spot. Just a couple minutes left in the podcast. Appreciate everyone joining us here. Real quickly, fellas, let's switch gears. Baseball schedule got dropped today. Let's just do a couple quick things. Like, other than it looking very different, where if you want to see the Beavers play baseball, March is a good opportunity. Big long homestand. Other than that, the home series are a little bit limited this year. But my big takeaway is Beaver Nation road trip May 2nd through 5th in Honolulu, Hawaii. Sounds quite nice. I went to Hawaii in May last year. It was very nice that time of year. But very different baseball schedule. Again, guys, just a couple, quick thoughts from each of you. It's different, but I like the competitiveness of it. Like RPI wise, they will still be in the mix with this schedule.
Yeah, this is pretty similar, I would say, to a Pac-12 schedule. They're fitting in more power conference teams during the middle of the week. They have Rutgers, they have Washington, They have Oregon 4 times in a row. Like, it's enough, right? It's definitely enough, on top of Nebraska and Iowa on the road, of course. Like, they did a good job with this schedule for a year in advance to decide it. I think they did okay.
Ryan, what do you think?
Oh yeah, it's very RPI friendly, and that's ultimately kind of what
all
matters.
You want. Yeah, that's all you want.
Yeah. And I think it's pretty solid overall. Yeah, for any Beaver fans that want to attend any home games, you only got a selection of really 20, and then that big homestand, that's going to be probably the time to do so. But yeah, it's a little less, and I know for students not super excited about that, but that's kind of what was the general expectations going into the season before they finalized the schedule, because that's kind of what I had been told, and I know it kind of sucks, but it's like, hey, you got to make the most of it. You got to show up, if you're a student here at Oregon State, and otherwise, like, you're gonna not have much opportunity to really do anything else outside of those kind of home stretches that you do have.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. Like I said, we'll obviously be diving into that more as the baseball season gets closer, but it's nevertheless here. Again, Oregon State's baseball schedule drops. You can check that out at BeaversEdge.com. Make sure to also check out Ryan Harlan's column on the quarterback play as well, coming up here on Friday as well. And make sure to stay tuned to Beavers Edge next week, as we'll be back gearing you guys up for San Jose State. For T.J. Mathewson, Ryan Harlan, Brenden Slaughter signing off. Appreciate you guys both joining me, and everyone tuning in to this edition.